With this tennis player example, I'll be talking about combining both pose-to-pose and straight-ahead animation. Now, if you saw the previous examples with the swordsman that I did earlier, one in pose-to-pose and one in straight-ahead, you'll notice that each of the approaches have their own advantages and disadvantages. Now, you may be wondering which one is better than the other, whereas the real question you should be asking is, why not combine both approaches? There are only very few. Actually, I can't really think of any disadvantages when combining both approaches for a scene. So with this example, I'll be talking about how you can utilize both approaches in the same shot. Now, because the shot is more detailed and more elaborate than the swordsman, I think it's best that we do sort of create a rough layout. So for this case, again, I created a rough drawing which features the character in multiple spots just so that I can get a feel of where the character or how the character should be scaled in terms of whether she's far away from the camera, whether she's closer, whether she's up in the air. And I just basically drew placeholder poses in poses that I might hit while I create my animation. So with that said, let me get to the animation point and how I thought about it in terms of both pose-to-pose and straight-ahead. So with the earlier pass of the animation, I'm going to show you guys when I decided to use pose-to-pose and when I decided to use straight-ahead, and why I would use whichever approach depending on the circumstance. Now, this is an earlier pass of the animation, so some drawings aren't there like in-betweens. I just kept it basic with the pose-to-pose and the straight-ahead. And you can see in my timeline, when things get like this, like in twos, that's most likely straight ahead. This is also straight ahead, but it's more like longer held straight ahead, meaning that I straight aheaded it, but I held each drawing for 4 frames. That can count as straight ahead animation, or mixing straight ahead with pose to pose. And I'm going to tell you guys why I decided to use them, like why whichever approach works. So for Monday, I like to use pose to pose for subtle actions like a character turning their head or a character just changing elevation. Things that don't consist of too much constant movement. It's all very snappy and pose to pose. So for this case, for the girl basically winding up the throw, serving the ball basically, I had her duck down, so that's my next pose, and then tossing the ball up in the air. So these I did pose to pose. Now, for the part where she actually hits the ball that's in the air or over an overhead swing, I did it straight ahead. This is so that I can actually feel the overall movement of her hands whipping out, her legs kind of shifting, her hips turning around as she hits. So this is where I can actually feel out the spontaneity of the character movement. So now it's getting into more subtle territory. See, I even labeled it straight ahead. So now it's straight ahead in 4s, meaning that, again, each drawing is held for 4 frames. And this is good when I want to have organic and spontaneous animation, but the movement is rather slow and not as, crazy. So things that aren't too fast. So I had an anticipation pose. I usually like to bring the character back quickly and then shoot out, just to create that weightiness of the anticipation. So she steps back, and then she goes forward, and I'm just constantly thinking about the arcs, the constant motion, and just keeping it consistent with the movement. So I did these drawings straight ahead. Some of them are held in 6s, 4s, and then for fast movements where she actually hits the ball, I just did those in 2s. And then it goes back to a strong pose. So one way you could do this actually is you draw this pose first, and then draw this pose. And then once you have those poses figured out, this is how a lot of my friends, or a lot of people that I admire, this is how they would animate, where they actually do everything pose to pose first, all the big, strong, bold poses, and then just straight ahead from they straight ahead from pose to pose. So you can draw these poses first, and then for the in-betweens, you actually just straight ahead. So that's one way of doing it, and actually that's a pretty clever way of doing it if you want to still have fun, yet keep the performance constricted within these poses. Now for here, it goes from strong poses, straight ahead. When I was using straight ahead, I was thinking of a lot of motion. A lot when she hits the ball, it's gonna be straight ahead because she's gonna swing the ball and she's also gonna like lose balance. She's gonna shift her weight around and anything with just a lot of movement. I'll just keep it straight ahead so it feels organic to me. And then when she runs out the screen, that's also straight ahead, but in fours because it's not. It's a pretty like gradual and subtle run. So that's how I would utilize straight ahead and post to pose. So if we were to review it, post to pose great for poses that you know you want to hit. It's great if you want those poses to land in terms of like think of it as beats that you want to hit. And for straight ahead, it's things that for me, it's things that I don't really know how to plan it out. I mean, I plan it out post to pose wise, but I still want the movement to feel organic and in ways accidental where I feel it out. That's when I would utilize straight ahead. Things with a lot of movement, a lot of dynamic action, and just a lot of stuff going on. I would suggest using straight ahead animation for this. And because I'm utilizing both worlds, I have both an animation that feels tight and organic. Now with this pass, I actually added a bunch more in-betweens and breakdowns. So here, I'll play it. And this is something that you can do after you have your poses figured out, your initial pass. This is me breaking down some of the post to pose that seem long, just giving it more information. So I even added a breakdown where even before she ducks down or lowers her pelvis, I wanted to break down of her just simply looking at her paddle and her ball and then ducking down 4 frames after. So breakdowns, again, it's connective tissue. It's the key information that connects the major keys. So that's how I was thinking about it. And I was just trying to finesse and add more information to some of the animation that are too long, that have too long of an exposure. Like some of these 4s and 2s and 6s, some of them needed more frames to actually describe the action. Now, once I have the rough animation done, I usually like to turn on the layers, the opacity of the layer so it's transparent, and I do a tie down pass. And my first tie down pass, let me see if I can find it here, is that I don't really, it's this one, is that I don't pay attention to the straight ahead drawings right away. I like to tie it down in terms of keys. So the way I think about these keys is, the extremes, how pushed the poses are, or whether the character is suspended in the air at the character's highest point or at the character's lowest points. That's all I was thinking, and that's how I would tie down how I would figure out my key tie down drawings. So let me flip through that actually. So if I flip through these drawings, you'll notice that it just feels pose to pose. And that's totally fine because I still want to have enough information whereas I could still draw on models, still draw solid and consistent. And I need multiple drawings, bold extremes that can serve as placeholders. So if I were to play it, you'll notice that it doesn't really match with the straight ahead parts because I wasn't really paying attention to those. And then once I actually have that tie down pass done, and let me just turn down the rough pass and turn on the tie down layer with the straight aheads this time. Now there's some straight ahead information. Some of them are pose to pose, some of them are straight ahead, but it's more elaborate. The only thing we really need to do now is to in between these drawings, make everything in 2s and 1s, have things slow in and slow out. So I wanted her to slow into this pose, and then as she jumps up, it's going to slow in, she's going to slow down. Well, this is straight ahead, so that's already figured out. But when it comes to these pose to pose, it's usually her slowing into the pose. Meaning she finishes her action and then her momentum decreases as she sinks into the next pose. That's how I was thinking about it. So if I were to turn on my tie down with all the in-betweens, this is what it would look like. Everything's all figured out. Some of the drawings are on ones. The way I use ones is I only want to emphasize certain parts of the animation where she's hitting the ball. And speaking of the ball, I did the ball in another layer where the ball is I actually animated the ball straight ahead. So some drawings, you'll notice that it pops in occasionally, the bouncing ball basically. This is something that you can do on top of your character playing tennis. I just animated a ball interacting with how she swings or wherever she's swinging, just to make it feel like it's a part of that world that the character's in. So that's basically how... I should stop saying that word basically. So this is the tennis assignment where I combined both post-to-post and straight-ahead. And this is honestly... To me, it's probably the best approach for animation once you've had a taste of both straight ahead and post to pose. But really think about the context of the scene and which approach is best, because some scenes you don't even need to utilize both. You can just either use one or the other. So in an earlier assignment that I showed with the girl turning her head, the take, that's all post to pose. When it comes to certain movements where it's just constant movement, try straight ahead. See what works best for you. These are, two of the more common approaches that you should try using, and I hope to see good stuff. Now, I do want to talk a bit of the animation and why I made certain choices, such as the anticipation, some of the overlap, and the timing. Now, if I were to flip through this carefully, I wanted her to look at the ball first, so we're communicating that she's about to swing. She's paying her new attention is now focused on the ball in her hand and the tennis racket. And so I had an anticipation pose where she kind of lowers herself and then tosses the ball up, and then she sinks or slows into this pose. Now here's where the anticipation comes in, the really quick anticipation, and this is a technique or a thing that you can use that will make your animation feel lively and more snappier. But you know how she's already in her down pose and she could just basically move into the pose where she's up in the air. But to create that extra weight, with a few drawings, or with just one drawing that lasts for 2 frames, I added another down to emphasize her, creating that quick momentum where she bends her knees even more, and then she shoots up. So if we were just to play that section, if I were to mark those out, notice how that small duck creates a very subtle but effective anticipation or weight redistribution. And I do that multiple times throughout the animation. So she hits it, she lands, and then she basically shifts her weight, so her hips are the ones that move first, and then her foot follows. And then she sinks into this pose. Now, remember when I said that having a very brief anticipation or a few anticipation drawings that only last for like 2 or 4 frames can help give that weightiness? I could just have her run to her next pose, but before that, I had her step back. Boom! And then she runs to her next pose. So that already creates extra driving force. So, and it just creates a nice texture where she slows in and then boom, see, slows into the pose and then builds that quick anticipation. Just those small little anticipation bits or drawings where where your character kind of slows into the pose and then snaps to create that quick momentum and then shoots, again gives it that nice snappiness to it. And that's something that I learned later on when I was working on Pig the Dam Keeper poems. We had a coworker, Sam Marin, who used that a lot, and it made the characters feel more alive and weighty. And I think that's something that you guys should start utilizing a lot more, creating anticipations and overshoots. So she hits a ball, it's a big scoop, boom, sinks into the pose. And for this one, I could have just made her do another anticipation thing where before she goes into here, she kind of steps back and then moves there. But I realized that because this motion or this gesture is so subtle, I don't think it's wise to do that. It's going to make the animation feel a bit too busy. And so I just made her sink into that pose. And it's a nice contrast from all the heavy animation that happens. And then she just hits it underhand, I guess. And then she runs forward. And I just scribbled that one really quickly. So again, with that in mind, boom, anticipation there, sinks into the pose. So everything feels like it has variety in terms of performance. Although this one, this could have been held a bit longer, or it could have held this pose a bit longer, but in all honesty, I think it looks okay. So yeah, that's the animation analysis of it. Anyways, that's all I wanted to talk about in terms of combining both pose-to-pose and straight-ahead. I hope you learned a lot from it, and I hope you guys utilize both approaches at the same time, and let it serve you.